Hello. Hello. I think we saw this bit of code earlier today, if you remember it. And I first saw it in a talk called What by Gary Bernhardt. You can see it there. It's very good. It's very funny. And I just thought it was the best thing ever at the time. So, like every software engineer, I decided to make my version of it. So this is MyWAT. I work at Harvest, and the other day I was working with our team lead for the ops team to add an index to one of our busiest tables. And we were preparing and getting ready, setting up our cluster, and I said, without thinking too much about it, now MySQL has an opportunity to be clever here, I hope it takes it. And my colleague paused and said, I didn't think I'd ever hear you say that. So MyWAT really stands for MySQL is the worst at things, and I'm going to try to tell you about it. To get us started, let's just create a table. It's a pretty simple table, right? It stores speakers, and it stores their name, maybe when they arrive in Paris, and what date their talk is at. Nothing fancy. Okay, we didn't enter any rows, so 0 is affected. Great. Let's insert some data. So maybe Franca came in on Thursday. Her talk is today. Great. This works as expected. Now we try to insert Piotr, and he doesn't want to tell us when he is arriving, and the database says, you know what, you can't do that because we declared arrives at can't be null. So that's all fine and good. And now we try to enter some data that's kind of in between, right? It tells us that Erin arrives at Ba, and that her talk date is 100,000 years in the past. And MySQL just says, all right, I inserted one row. I'll give you some warnings, but don't worry about it. And you're like, what? So let's see what this actually did. It gave us a table that stores Erin's columns, for which we provided invalid values, as all zeros. Now, I think Victor earlier said, there's a place and a time where I could maybe convince you that this is a reasonable thing to do, but I'd be hard-pressed to find that place and time. It's certainly not at zeros. So what? All right, let's try to insert some valid data again. Victor is busy working his compiler. He arrived today. His talk is today. That's fine and good. You can say that a time is just a date, and that reasonably sets the time to the beginning of that day. Nothing fancy here. But we try to update it, and we say, you know what? Just erase all the data that I gave you and put in nulls, which should be invalid. But once again, MySQL tells us it found out a row, it changed the row, and it just gives us some warnings, but it doesn't tell us what those warnings are. What? So now we look at data, and we see that Erin and Victor, by completely different paths, arrived at the same bogus all zeros for any meaningful data storage, which should be invalid. That's what we're using a database for, right? So this is Anchor Watt, the actual Watt in here. Good news. The good news is there is a way to make MySQL behave like a reasonable relational database system. And then to do that, you have to tell it, you know what, set your mode to strict all tables, like behave reasonably. And if we do this, our invalid examples from before just error out. And we think, all right, maybe I went through that too fast. Bar is invalid for a date time, which we're expecting it arrives at. And if we try to null out the data that Victor gave us, the database will say, you know what, this column can't be null. So it's stopping these operations from succeeding. And you know what? Sean Connery gives us a thumbs up. He goes like this in the GIF that I had. And we think that we're in the clear and that MySQL is providing us with safe and reasonable behavior, which, by the way, is the default as of 5.7, the current stable version. So you don't need to set strict tables. You just get that behavior. But if you try to cast those invalid values as the types that you're expecting, you just get nulls all the time anyway without errors, even in the strict mode. So MyWAT. That's all I have. Thank you.